You think they are free? You look at them weeks later, maybe months later, after they betrayed you, after they dropped you like something that had no use anymore, and they seem fine, calm, relieved, maybe even happy, and you are the one shaking on the floor, trying to breathe through a pain so deep it feels like it is rewriting your body from the inside. But stay with me, because what your eyes see is not the full truth. That calm face is not peace. That distance is not strength. That silence is not healing. It is the pause before the crash. And if you have ever stared at your phone at 3 a.m., asking how someone could hurt you and walk away untouched, this is for you, because today we are breaking open the real pattern. We are looking at what happens when someone who runs from closeness betrays someone who loved with their whole heart. Why do they do it? Why do they act cold after giving so much? And why does it seem like they move on while you are still trying to survive? Listen closely, because the answer will change the way you see the ending. And before you click away, hear this part all the way through, because the last truth is the one most people never say out loud. When they betray you, whether it is cheating, ghosting, lying, or a sudden cold discard, something happens at first that can look like victory on their side. Their brain gives them a quick reward, a hit of relief, a sharp breath of space. For a nervous system that fears being trapped, pushing you away can feel like taking off a weight. They feel control again. They feel untouched. They may even look at your pain and show nothing, not because they are monsters in that moment, but because they have shut down feeling in order to survive their own fear. They disconnect. They go numb. They go into protection mode. To them, your love began to feel too close, too real, too sharp. Your care saw too much. Your presence reached places they spent years hiding, so they put out the fire by leaving the room. They walked away and told themselves they won. But that is the lie. They did not just end a relationship. They cut off the very connection that had been helping them function. They do not understand that while you were loving them, you were also steadying them. You were calming storms they could not name. You were softening shame they could not carry. You were reading tension in their body before they had words for it. You were safety. You were rhythm. You were the place their system went to rest. And now that is gone. Remember that, because this is where the story really begins. They may tell themselves they only lost a partner, someone too emotional, someone too intense, someone who asked for too much. That is the story their ego builds so they can live with what they did. But on a deeper level, they did not only lose a person, they lost a living regulation system. You were not just loving them in a romantic way, you were responding to them with unusual depth. You felt shifts in their mood fast. You sensed pain behind silence. You noticed what was wrong before they said a word. That kind of empathy changes the whole atmosphere of a connection. And for someone who has spent years surviving through distance, your presence can become a hidden support beam. They feel better around you but do not fully understand why. They sleep better, think clearer, feel less scattered, their panic lowers, their body softens, and then they make the biggest mistake of all. They confuse the safety you created with their own independence. They think, I am stronger now, I do not need this. They mistake borrowed stability for permanent healing. It is like someone breathing through an oxygen line and deciding the tube is the problem because they forgot it is the reason they can breathe, so they cut it. At first, there is still air left. At first, they feel free, but the source is gone. That is why the relief stage is temporary. It is not recovery, it is anesthesia. And when it wears off, the body starts asking questions the ego cannot answer. So why did they do it if the connection helped them? That is the question that keeps cutting through your mind. If you mattered, why destroy it? If they felt safe, why burn it down? Because to a person who fears intimacy, too much closeness does not feel like heaven. It feels like danger. They have a small container for deep connection. They want love, yes, but they cannot hold much of it without feeling overwhelmed. In the beginning, your love feels beautiful, like rain in a dry place, like relief, like being understood without effort. But as the bond deepens, something flips inside them. The closeness that once felt healing begins to feel like engulfment. They start to fear losing control, losing space, losing self. Their fear system lights up and sends one brutal message: get out now. The tragedy is that most of them cannot explain this clearly. They do not have words ready for that panic. So instead of saying, I am scared, they start building a case against you. They focus on your flaws. They call you too much, too emotional, too demanding, too intense. They turn your love into pressure so they can justify escape. Then comes the deactivation move, the betrayal, the cheating, the coldness, the disappearing act. It creates instant distance. It forces a break they were too frightened to ask for honestly. Stay with me here, because this part matters. Many times the betrayal is not about pleasure, it is about escape. They tell themselves they are choosing freedom, but what they are really choosing is fear. They tell themselves they are protecting peace, but they are protecting an old wound. They are choosing the familiar pain of isolation over the risk of real intimacy. And once the high of escape fades, the next phase begins. This is where their nervous system starts reaching for what is gone. Think about phantom pain. When the body loses something, the brain can still send signals to the missing part. It expects a response, it expects contact, it expects the old path to work. That is what starts happening with you. Their system had built patterns around your presence. Stress happens, reach for you. Shame rises, reach for you. Fear spikes, reach for you. Calm returns. That loop gets wired in deep. Then suddenly, you are not there. They have a hard day. They feel sick. They get insecure. Their body goes down the old road before the mind can stop it. It reaches and finds nothing. That is when the void hits. That is when the stress starts flooding in stronger than before. Because now the system is not just dysregulated. It is dysregulated after knowing what regulation once felt like. And that changes everything. If you have ever wondered why some people come back late, this is one reason, not because they suddenly became wise, but because silence exposes what distraction was hiding. Now, they try to go back to old coping habits. Work more, scroll more, drink more, stay busy, stay numb, date quickly, act unbothered, pretend nothing touched them. But here is the problem. Before meeting you, those old tools may have worked just enough to get them through. After being deeply seen, deeply soothed, deeply understood, those tools lose power. You changed the baseline. You showed them what full emotional contact feels like, even if they could not hold it for long. So now the old life feels flatter. The old distractions feel weaker. The noise does not cover the ache the way it used to. They do not always name it as missing you. Their pride resists that. Their image resists that. But they feel a background restlessness they cannot explain. Sleep gets thinner. Joy gets duller. Even success feels strange. That is the hidden crash. And when it gets heavy, many of them do what they always do when discomfort rises. They look for a replacement. They start dating again. They post pictures. They move fast. From the outside, it can crush you. It can make you feel replaceable. But listen carefully. New does not mean healed. New does not mean deep. New does not mean better. A rebound often becomes another attempt to recreate the feeling of relief without doing the work that real intimacy requires. And that is where the comparison begins, whether they admit it or not. Every new person meets the memory of what they had with you. The conversation might be fine, the chemistry might be okay, the person may be kind and available and easy. On paper it looks safer, simpler, cleaner, but then something starts missing. The depth is not there. The unspoken understanding is not there. The subtle reading of their moods is not there. The way you could feel what they meant before they finished a sentence is not there. And suddenly, what looked peaceful starts feeling flat. They may tell themselves, this is healthier because it is less intense, but part of them notices the emptiness. With you, they did not always need to explain the weather inside them. You could often sense it. With someone new, they have to speak more clearly. They have to reveal more directly. They have to do emotional work, and that feels heavy to someone who avoids emotional labor, so they get irritated, detached, restless. They call it boredom. They call it bad timing. They call it lack of spark. But many times what they are really feeling is contrast. The new person is being compared to a connection that changed their system. That is why they may move from one shallow bond to another, or settle into something safe and surface level just to avoid the pain of being alone. If you are still listening, catch this truth. They may keep meeting people, but that does not mean they keep finding what they lost. Then comes the deeper chamber, shame. Not the small kind, the kind that sits underneath the skin. When they were with you, they were being reflected in a certain light. You saw beyond their walls. You saw softness under distance, possibility under fear, goodness under defense. You believed in parts of them they barely believed in themselves. And because you looked at them that way, they felt more worthy around you, more human, more redeemable, more whole. Then they betrayed you. They broke the bond with the one person who held up that kind of mirror, and after that, whether they admit it or not, they are left alone with another reflection, not your loving gaze, their own conscience, their own memory, their own choices. This is where the inner split grows. On the outside, they may protect the story. It just did not work. You were too much. It was for the best. But in the quiet, another truth starts leaking in. They remember the way you looked when they hurt you. They remember the shock, the tears, the disbelief. And deep down, that hits the old wound they already carried. Maybe I really do ruin good things. Maybe I am what I feared. Maybe I am the damage. The hardest part is that shame needs repair to soften. It needs honesty. It needs apology. It needs accountability. But those things require vulnerability, and vulnerability is exactly what they run from. So guilt stays trapped inside, turning into pressure, turning into private heaviness, turning into a life where the outside smile and the inside truth are no longer the same thing. And because the ending was usually messy, cold, abrupt, or unfinished, the memory does not settle cleanly. The brain struggles with unfinished stories. It keeps returning to them, trying to close the loop. A real goodbye gives the mind structure. A full conversation gives grief a door to walk through. But betrayal creates open circuits. Ghosting creates open circuits. Sudden abandonment creates open circuits. No explanation, no real ending, no emotional completion. They may think that leaving without dealing with it is easier. It is not. It creates an unanswered file in the background of the mind. Did I make the wrong choice? What would have happened if I stayed? Why did I run? Did they ever stop loving me? Are they happier now? These questions keep spinning because the ending never landed properly. You suffer at first because you feel the shock directly. But if you are willing to grieve, willing to cry, willing to face the truth, your mind slowly closes the loop. You begin to understand, you begin to release, you begin to heal. They often do the opposite. They bury, they distract, they suppress. And suppression does not erase the story. It freezes it. Years later, a song, a street, a smell, a random quiet drive can bring you back into their mind with painful force. Not because they are magical, not because fate is sending signs, because unfinished pain always looks for an opening. And when no real closure was built, memory keeps knocking. This is why your silence becomes so powerful. After the betrayal, many of them expect reaction, long messages, tears, begging, questions, chasing. They expect you to keep proving their importance. Even your pain can feed their ego if it keeps you emotionally attached. But when something changes in you, when you stop trying to save what broke you, when you go truly silent, it hits differently. Not silence as a tactic, not silence as a game. Real silence, no access, no updates, no emotional labor, no peeking, no breadcrumbs, no reaching. That kind of silence sends a message louder than any speech. It says, I see the truth now. It says, I am no longer available for this. It says, you no longer get to live in my energy for free. And for someone who secretly believed you would always care more, that can feel like a deep shock because now the story changes. They are no longer the one choosing distance while you hold the door open. The door is shut, the room is quiet, the attention is gone, and attention, even painful attention, is still a form of supply. When that vanishes, they feel irrelevance. They feel the loss of being central in your emotional world. That is hard for them. Being argued with is something they can handle. Being missed is something they can secretly enjoy. But being truly released, that lands like cold air in an empty house. And if they see you rebuilding, smiling, glowing, living, the message gets even louder. You were not destroyed. You were transformed. Now stretch the timeline forward. A year, 5 years, maybe more. From the outside, they may look settled. They may have a partner, a family, a routine, a polished life. And maybe some parts of it are real, but do not confuse functioning with fullness. Do not confuse stability with depth. Many people can build a life that looks okay from across the room while living emotionally half awake inside it. That is the long-term cost of choosing contraction over growth. They do not suddenly become free by avoiding the work. They just become more practiced at living below their real emotional range. They pick what feels manageable, safe, surface level, predictable, less risk, less intensity, less truth. For a while that can look like peace, but over time a different ache appears, a dull fatigue, a flatness behind the eyes, a feeling that life is moving, but something inside is not. Because deep connection is not just romance, it is vitality, aliveness, expansion. And once someone has tasted that, even briefly, a grey life can start to feel very grey. They may never say it out loud, most will not, but some part of them remembers what it felt like to be fully met, fully seen, fully stirred awake. That memory does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it sits at the dinner table in silence. Sometimes it arrives in the middle of an ordinary afternoon and turns the whole room heavy for a minute. That is not punishment from outside, it is consequence from within. And this is where you must understand your part clearly. It was not that you were too little. It was not that you were impossible to love. It was not that your devotion had no value. The problem was never that you lacked worth. The problem was that your depth touched places they were not ready to face. You brought heat to a system built around emotional winter. You brought truth to a person surviving through distance. You brought intimacy to someone who still treated closeness like a threat. That does not make your love wrong. It means it landed in a heart that did not yet know how to hold it without panicking. So do not sit there shrinking yourself to make their choices make sense. Do not retell the story in a way that turns your love into the mistake. Love was not the mistake. Lack of boundaries was the lesson. Overgiving was the lesson. Ignoring your own pain while trying to understand theirs was the lesson. Staying too long after the pattern revealed itself was the lesson. And if you let this heartbreak teach you, it will not just leave you wounded, it will leave you wiser, stronger, cleaner in your standards, sharper in your self-respect. And yes, there is one more truth you need to hear before this ends, so do not skip this final stretch, because this is where the power comes back to you. You do not need to hate them. Hate keeps the cord alive. You do not need to wait for them to understand. You do not need one last apology, one last confession, one last dramatic return to prove your value. Your healing does not depend on their awakening. Your freedom begins the moment you stop making their inner world your responsibility. Let them keep their walls if they choose them. Let them call survival peace if that helps them sleep. Let them tell whatever story they need. You are not here to manage their version anymore. You are here to reclaim your own life. And the beautiful thing is this: you can heal. Your mind can rewire. Your heart can recover. Your body can learn safety again. The grief that feels endless today will not stay this sharp forever. It will move, it will teach, it will burn off what no longer belongs in you. The part that begged for crumbs will fade. The part that chased confusing love will weaken. The part that abandoned itself to keep someone else comfortable will finally be seen. And what rises after that is stronger than the old you, clearer, calmer, harder to fool, softer in the right places, fierce with boundaries, open to real love, not hungry for impossible love. So walk forward. Do not keep checking the ruins behind you. There is nothing there now but an old pattern and a closed door. What is ahead is real. Your breath is real. Your future is real. Your power is real. You were never the one who got left empty. You were the one who survived, learned, and came back home to yourself.